Hello, greetings. I wanted to jump on this morning and talk to you about an email that I received. I think this will clarify. There's a couple of questions in the email. I think this will clarify some things about what I'm doing. And I also responded to a comment on my blog this morning. Maybe we'll take a quick look at that too. But this is the best way that I can interact this way. This person doesn't know that I'm sharing this. I'm just going to blot out their name so you don't. I don't want to go into all that. I just wanted to share. It's not the first time I've had people inquire about this kind of stuff. So I'm going to jump right in here. So the context of this is that if you're not familiar with this, and I think you probably are, but if you're not familiar with this, I'm working on a project and book, a photographic project and book. I hope to release next year. I've been working on it a couple of years, and this goes back several years, the content or the context of the book surrounding these theories from an author. It's really based in Ernest Becker's work. He's an cultural anthropologist. He published a book in 1973, actually died that year as well, too, unfortunately. But he published a book called The Denial of Death. And this is what my work is based on. And I'm using the place that I live now. I live in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, kind of in the central, a little bit western part of Colorado, right in the Rocky Mountains. And this ground was occupied and lived on and for time immemorial, basically forever, by 12 different bands of the Ute tribe, the Native Americans. I'm addressing one particular band called the Tabawatch that actually, where I live right now, this very land, they roamed and spent their summers up here and hunted and fished and used all these plants, both ceremonial and medicinal. And so, if you look at my work on my website, you'll see that I've spent a lot of time working on flora, the flora portion of the work, the plants. Like I said, there's medicinal, symbolic kind of things, and I've photographed them in a lot of different processes, and I'm working that out aesthetically. But the idea behind this is, I just posted an essay the other day about this idea of residue and memory, and that's kind of the approach I'm taking. But this person had specific questions about what I'm doing. So I'm going to jump over here and I'll just show you the email. Like I said, I blotted their name out because I didn't tell them I was going to do this. But if you're watching, you'll get the answers here, of course, as well as in email. But this was the other day, actually, when I can't remember. It was 1 July. It's the other day, 2 days ago. They said, "Hello, Quinn. I follow your blog and read as much as I can about what you're doing. I have to admit, I may be missing something. I do love the color work. They look amazing even on my screen. Thank you. I think I understand what you're saying with the photos. I just had questions about the title of the book and what it means." Yes, and I think this came in after I published the essay In the Shadow of Sun Mountain, the psychology of the psychology of othering and the origins of evil. And that's what I'm going to explain to you on this video. They go on to say that very thing. In the Shadow of Sun Mountain, I get it. That's where the pictures are being made and are related to the Native American tribe that lived there, correct? Yes, that's exactly right. So the main title of the book, In the Shadow of Sun Mountain, is that idea that where I'm at, just east of me, kind of northeast of me, is this big, beautiful 14,000 foot, 4,000 meter almost mountain that was very sacred and is still to the Tabawatch specifically. And the Uncompahgre is the tribe name they go by today, or the band name they go by today. But they call it Pikes Peak, but the real name is Tava. It means the first to see the sun, kind of thing. So yes, the title of the book is that, In the Shadow of Sun Mountain, where I'm making these photographs on the land where this particular band of indigenous people thrived, lived, and did all their day-to-day living here. And I'm just trying to give an idea, this idea of residue and memory through the photograph. So that this person says, I think I understand what you're saying with the photos, and I think I would imagine that's coming through. I hope. If you have any questions or you have comments, let me know. But I get that where the pictures are being made related to, correct, yes. The psychology of othering and the origins of evil. This is where I'm struggling. Can you please explain these ideas to me? Thank you for your time. Keep up the great work, and I look forward to seeing you. But I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I know I didn't ask you if I could share that, but it's completely anonymous, so it shouldn't be a big deal. But yes, let me first explain the psychology of othering. That's not a uncommon kind of idea today. I've been working with these ideas for a very long time, so it's one of those things that I've had on my mind for decades, and my work surrounds this idea of othering and marginalized communities. And for over 30 years, I've been making photographs and asking questions about why we treat people who are different from us differently, kind of in-group, out-group ideas. So the psychology of othering is exactly that. It gets to the core of how and why we other people, meaning that we treat people who are different from us in any way, really, the way they dress, the way they think, what religion they belong to, what political group they belong to, what sports team they like. That all it can be anything, really. I mean, it's pervasive in our lives, right? So that in-group, out-group idea. And I've been specifically interested in the big events in history, right? The genocide and the ethnocide and the absolute the marginalizations of these groups. They're not really that large in fact, but marginalization of these groups, and then acting on that in very vicious and the atrocities committed because of this. That's my questions have always been surrounding those ideas of not what happened, right? But why it happened. That's what I'm most interested in, is why these things take place. And so the psychology of othering and the origins of evil are encapsulating both the concept of what I'm working on. So if we step back and look at my work rooted in the theories of Ernest Becker, The Denial of Death, he clearly explains in the book that the fear, the knowledge of our own death, acts on our unconscious mind every day. It drives so much of our behavior. And what it does, and this just didn't happen in the last 100 years. This has been thousands of years. Human beings have basically evolved, psychologically speaking, to repress the knowledge of our death. So every day we wake up, one of our main goals in life is to push death away. We don't want to think about it. We don't want to talk about it because it bothers us tremendously bad. Becker talks about having, really what he's referring to is this large neocortex, our forebrain. We have this big, wonderful mind, right? We can think 5,000 years in the future, 10,000 years in the past. We can envision something and bring it to life. We can build things and make things. So we have this incredible mind, all that, and then to know we're going to die and rot and decay and be forgotten. And so he's not talking about, when I say death anxiety or the fear of death, we're not talking about the actual event of dying. That's not, I mean, some people fear that, I don't want to drown. I don't want to burn in a fire, that kind of thing, right? That's thanophobic. That's kind of a different thing. Death anxiety isn't about the moment of death. Death anxiety and terror management theory, these two concepts I'm working with, death anxiety is about being insignificant and being forgotten. That's the core of what we fear most. So it's not the death, it's the anxiety of living this life, going through this life, just to end up dying and being forgotten. And you can attest to this. I bet you there's few people out there that knew who their great grandparents were, probably even the names, what they did, what their interests were. I mean, we're just talking a few generations back, right? We're not talking hundreds of years or thousands of years. We're just talking a little while back in our own family tree. And I bet there's a lot of people that could never, I don't even know who they were. They're forgotten, right? That's our fate as well too. And so that's what we struggle with. So when we talk about death anxiety, that's really what we're talking about. This inability to face our mortality, to come to terms, like Albert Camus said, to come to terms with your death, come to terms with your death. Therefore, thereafter, anything is possible. Is what he said. And I think what he meant by that was, like Buddhists have a practice of meditating on their death and non-existence and non-self and all that kind of thing. Becker was getting at that as well too. Coming to terms with your death. Soren Kierkegaard from the 19th century talked a lot about this. He related it to faith and having something to lean on and coming to terms. He talked about the school of anxiety, going to the school of anxiety, right? Being able to come in, think about your death, and not have these kind of malignant manifestations that death anxiety provokes in people. And keep in mind, while the knowledge of our death is a huge driver of our daily human behavior, 99% of this or 100% of this, it almost happens all unconsciously. We're not conscious of what we're doing. So we look at other things and we act out on them without even, it's an unconscious, most psychological activity is, right? But this is definitely mostly unconscious. So in our culture, we have these constructs that we lean on. And depending on what culture you're in, you might lean on religion, you might lean on politics, or your big company job and money, wealth, fame, whatever it is your culture provides. And there are all kinds of different cultures that provide all different kinds of constructs or illusions to lean on. We lean on those to bolster our self-esteem. And what our self-esteem does is it buffers death anxiety. So think about it this way. You get an attaboy or an attagirl or a good job kind of thing at work, or some kind of award, that bolsters your self-esteem. That means you're leaning on that cultural construct to bolster your self-esteem that keeps death from your mind. That's the idea. And it's a good thing, because like Becker said, if we didn't have this ability to repress that knowledge, we'd be curled up in the corner reaching for a Xanax the size of a Buick. I don't know. I think Woody Allen might have said that. But the idea is we have these built-in psychological repression systems evolved over time, so human beings can function day to day. We wouldn't be able to function if this is all we thought about every day. And it could be that way too. So there's some theories about mental health, especially depression, some leaning towards schizophrenia, things like this that are saying it really reveals what life is, right? And life is a very difficult thing to deal with. You get to the core of it, right? The worm at the core, I'll talk about that in a second. You get to the core of it, and that knowledge of death, you strip it's all meaningless. We don't know our purpose. All of those kinds of things, right? We just don't know. So if we were to dwell on that every day and have that in the forefront of our minds, we would be able to function. So culture gives us ways to repress that through bolstering our self-esteem and repressing the death anxiety. So when I talk about the psychology of othering, there's two ways this can manifest itself. There are good ways it can manifest itself, and there are a lot of bad ways that it can manifest itself. So in the in-group and out-group, in the in-group, if you're doing things that bolster your self-esteem and lift you up, and the people around you, this like-minded people support those things, and those are really good things. So, you get a promotion at your job or whatever. It doesn't matter what the in-group is. If you're part of your in-group and you're doing things that they like, that's going to be a reward for you, self-esteem, ego, psychologically speaking. Now, if you come along, you have this set of cultural beliefs or this cultural worldview, and you come along and you run into somebody that doesn't share those beliefs. So a cultural worldview on an in-group is you share a belief in reality the same belief in reality as the people around you, right? We all share this illusion that this is important. You should act like this. You should do that. You should dress like this. You should believe in this. You shouldn't believe in that. Those are all shared beliefs in a reality. So when you come up to people or come meet people who are different from you, and you don't share their beliefs, whatever those are, right? Like I said, it could be religion, politics, sports teams, occupation, hobbies, interests, whatever it is. If you run into people that don't share those beliefs, a lot of times what that does is it creates conflict, meaning that, wait a minute, let's take religion, for example, or politics. Wait a minute, they don't believe what they believe is wrong. I'm right and they're wrong. And what this does, it starts the seed of conflict. And this is what my work is about. That's what I call the origins of evil. The minute you come against or come up to someone who doesn't share your cultural worldview, that's what Becker called them, and they're different from you, what that does is it brings into question your own beliefs unconsciously, right? It brings in, wow, they believe that, maybe I'm wrong. And for that instant, it creates anxiety because you're leaning on this to buffer your death anxiety. So when that's threatened, that creates major conflict. So the short answer to it is, I'm either going to bring you over to my side because my side is right, I'm correct, you're wrong, whether it's a god, a politician, whatever it is, doesn't matter. I'm going to bring you over to my side. And if I can't convince you that you're wrong and bring you over or convert you, I'm going to eliminate you. That's kind of our general response to people who have different beliefs than us. So when I talk about the psychology of othering and the origins of evil, the subtitle of my book, what I'm talking about is how we other because of this knowledge of our impending death and the anxiety and the existential dread that creates, and how we buffer it. That very tool that we use to buffer it is challenged. If it's challenged, it starts that seed of conflict. And conflict can be personal, like on a neighbor to neighbor scale, or it can be global, like world wars. Those conflicts start when different worldviews clash. So I read the entire book, The Worm at the Core, on the Role of Death in Life by Solomon, Pazinski, and Greenberg. I read that on this very YouTube channel, on my YouTube channel here. We went through 11 weeks. We read the book. That book is very important because it does two things. First, it lays out most of Becker's theories about this. So Becker wrote this book in 1973. His theories were just out there. There was no empirical evidence to support them, right? Most people thought it was kooky and weird. And what are you talking about? I don't think about death, blah, blah, blah. That's the kind of responses I usually get to. But these social psychologists, they were experimental social psychologists, came along in the 80s, took Becker's book and figured out ways, and clinically in laboratory tests, to provide empirical evidence and framework for Becker's theories. And if you read that book, this is incredibly convincing, right? This is like, it's not like, well, you can have your opinion, but that sounds kooky and weird. It may sound kooky and weird, but the bottom line is these theories have been proven time and time again, how this knowledge of our mortality drives human behavior, the conflicts it creates because we're constantly trying to defend our worldview if we're challenged. And so the idea behind my book is I've taken that and I've written about that and I've described that in detail, right? The science, the academics behind it, all that. And I encourage you to, if you do end up getting my book and reading it, I hope you dig further into it because I can only do so much. I'm not an anthropologist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm just standing on the shoulders of these great thinkers who are a lot smarter than I am. And it's just been kind of the Rosetta Stone moment for me when I figured this out a few years ago about why the genocide, the ethnocide, why do we think poorly of people who aren't like us? I think it was Virginia Woolf or somebody, I can't remember exactly who, said, look, I'll dislike you for the color of your shirt or the size of your nose. And Becker reiterates that by saying, we look for scapegoats, because he calls it existential dread or existential guilt. I'm sorry, about just existing, and the anxiety. It's always rumbling right under the surface, right? We get a glimpse of it here or there when we're reminded of death, when we pass an accident or hear a siren or walk by a graveyard or a funeral home. All of these remind us that we have a limited time, that we all are going to die. And so this way of buffering that, this way of dealing with that, leaning on these cultural constructs, finding illusions, or Becker calls them immortality projects. I spent a lot of time in the book talking about my own. It's kind of a little autobiography. I don't know if it's so little, but I go through my creative life, and how I've leaned on these theories to repress and to buffer my own existential dread, right? I understand that I'm kind of intellectualizing this whole thing by doing this, by using the very ideas that I'm talking about and creating a buffer for myself. I get that. I'm very well aware of it. But what I want to come through in the work is two things. I want to make people aware of these theories, and hopefully, one or two people get it and start talking about it to other people, and they get it. And these ideas of being aware and being conscious of why we do the things we do when we do them will really change how you're aware and conscious of. So when you run into something or someone who's different, you don't automatically react unconsciously. You say, wait a minute, I'm thinking this way about this, and it's conflicting with my worldview. So what do I do? And that's all, and that's what Becker wanted too. His hopes were that, he didn't understand why these theories world leaders weren't embracing these and trying to promote them and all those kinds of things, right? Because it does make sense if we were to slow down and think about this before we act. Like, your neighbor doesn't look the way you do, or the stranger has a different belief in this, or the politics. Look at the politics today. Look at how religion's always been, right? Solomon and Becker and Pazinski talk about this rock place and this hard place position. The rock place being kind of the isms, the fundamentalism, and having certainty about your beliefs, and certitude, and being aggressive and not moving at all for things that are different. And the hard place, where I consider myself to be, is the more uncertain, the not knowing, the open and flexibility. It's not a great place to be, but I'm malleable, and I'm open to letting other people buffer their own existential dread the way they need to, as long as it's not hurting anyone, right? So this rock place creates a lot of problems in the world. You see it, in fundamentalism, in politics and religion, and the way they lash out at their other. And anyone can be othered, right? This is in-group, out-group stuff. So it's not about one particular group or the other. We're all in an in-group, and we're all in an out-group, so to speak. So it's a very interesting phenomenon. And I hope I've answered the question about the psychology of othering and the origins of evil. So when we start othering people and we start having conflict, that's the seed, that's the beginning of evil. That's the origin of evil. That's where wars start. They start really tiny, in a tiny conflict that grows and expands, and it can go quickly, it can go slowly, whatever it is. Conflict is the origins of evil. And conflict generally comes from people who don't share a belief in the same reality, right? The belief in the same God, the belief in the same politics, the political positions, the belief in the same sports teams, whatever I've mentioned before, all those things. That's the origins of evil. And if you want a good book to read, in fact, you can see it right there, Escape from Evil. That's Becker's he wrote them, he may have written that before, but The Denial of Death and Escape from Evil were supposed to be one big tome, but his wife kind of split it up in the end, or he split it up in the end, and he didn't ever want that published, but they published it, they put it all together, and that Escape from Evil really delves in to these ideas deeply about what evil is, where it comes from, all those kinds of things. And the big takeaway, here's the big takeaway about it. The origins of evil start with a small seed of conflict, with people trying to defend their worldviews or cultural worldviews and being threatened about being wrong. And being wrong means they can't buffer their death anxiety. So that's where it starts. But what happens, like I said, you don't believe in this? Well, I'm either going to convert you over to my belief because I'm right and you're wrong. And this happens on both sides. I'm right and you're wrong. Or I'm going to get rid of you. So what the aggressor does, and what I write in my essay on my blog, my latest blog, what I write in there is the aggressor comes, in this case, the white colonizers coming into the Western United States under the manifest destiny, right? God told us to do this. God has given us this right to do this to these savages, these less than human being, less than human animals, basically. And what that does is the takeaway here is they're trying to fight their version of evil, what they perceive as evil, with evil. So get that. Coming against evil with evil. It doesn't work. It never will. It's a feedback loop. So the idea of getting rid of evil with evil will never work. It never has. And I'm afraid that human beings in this condition we're in will never change. This stuff will go on. It'll cycle through until we get rid of ourselves. Nuclear war, climate disaster, whatever it is, whatever happens, it will be based in this idea of trying to get rid of evil. And keep in mind, your evil is different than their evil. Your evil is different from my evil. It's all based in the cultural worldviews we hold, and what is right and what is wrong. Those are all, like I said, I'm in this hard place area. Those are all gray areas. It depends on what culture you come from and how you perceive, good and evil. And that's the whole idea behind this. So when you had the white colonizers come through, and really this is rooted in white supremacy, if we really strip all of it away, when you had the white colonizers come through the West here under the banner of God, manifest destiny, they were empowered to defend their cultural worldview and to take whatever they needed from dehumanizing and just absolutely subjugating the inferiors, as they call them, the savages, kill them, torture them, all that stuff, no problem, because it's all, we're getting rid of the evil. And that's the core problem of this. And that's why in this work, I'm trying to both explain these theories, give examples. And this is just one example. I'm just using this because this is where I live now. And this, I'm very aware of what land I live on and the history of it. So I'm just using this as an example. This has happened throughout humanity. This is just one example. I did some work in Germany when I lived there on the Shoah and the Holocaust. Same thing. Darfur, Rwanda, Pol Pot in Cambodia. I mean, on and on and on and on. These big, massive genocide and ethnocide events, all rooted in this stuff. So anyway, I wanted to share that with you. And I hope that answers your question, the questions I got in email there. And if you haven't read it yet, go over to my blog and check out the latest essay. I called it Life Asked Death. And I love the quote at the top of the page. The quote says, "Life asks death, Death, why do people love me but hate you?" Death responded, because you are a beautiful lie and I am a painful truth. Thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it and got something out of it, and we'll see you again sometime soon. Ciao. Have a great day. Be well. Be grateful. Be humble. And enjoy every day. You don't know when it ends.